Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of History's Greatest Battles. As always, if you enjoy this podcast and know somebody that enjoys this genre of history, please share the podcast with them. Today's battle, fought in 371 BC, marked the first time Sparta, the most disciplined and feared military force in Greece, was decisively defeated on the battlefield. For centuries, Sparta's warriors had dominated through their relentless training, their iron discipline, and their unmatched ability to hold a phalanx together in the face of any foe. But at Leuctra, all of that shattered. This was not merely a battle lost for Sparta, it was the moment that her power began to unravel. The Theban general Epaminondas, through tactical brilliance and the disciplined execution of his forces, dismantled Spartan supremacy in a single afternoon. His unorthodox strategy, massing his forces on one flank and refusing the other, and unleashing the elite sacred band, redefined forever the art of war. The significance of Leuctra simply cannot be overstated. The defeat of Sparta created a vacuum of power in Greece, allowing Philip of Macedon to rise unchallenged. The tactics Epaminondas pioneered were later perfected by Philip and his son, Alexander the Great, whose campaigns spread Greek culture, language, religion, and Greek military dominance across the known world. To understand Leuctra is to understand a turning point in history. This battle was the crack in the foundation of Spartan hegemony. Its outcome reshaped Greece and, by extension, the Western world that followed. Let's now experience the Battle of Leuctra.
Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 82, The Battle of Leuctra, July of 371 BC. Theban forces, 6,000 hoplites and 15 cavalry. Spartan forces, 10,000 hoplites and 1,000 cavalry. The Theban victory at Leuctra shattered Spartan dominance, a dominance that had held the Greek peninsula in an iron grip since the end of the Peloponnesian War. For the first time, the myth of Spartan invincibility was broken, and the balance of power shifted. But Theban supremacy was fleeting. Their rise destabilized Greece, sparking bitter rivalries and further conflict. In the chaos, an opportunity emerged for a new force to rise, Macedon. Led by Philip Roman II and later his son Alexander, the Macedonians would seize control of Greece, ending the era of city-state independence and paving the way for an empire that would reshape the ancient world. Leuctra was not just a victory for Thebes, it was the beginning of the end for classical Greece as it had been known.
When Athens fell in 404 BC, crushed beneath the weight of Spartan victory in the Peloponnesian War, the landscape of Greece shifted. Sparta, unmatched in the art of war, rose to dominate the city-states, the mighty polis that had long defined the Greek world. Militarily, it made sense. After all, Sparta's warriors were without equal, men shaped from birth for war, with a discipline as unyielding as their iron shields. Yet politically, socially, this Spartan dominance was a poison in the veins of Greece. The rigid austerity of Spartan life, their brutal order, their iron-fisted rule, could not take root outside of their own borders. Other city-states, free-spirited, proud, and independent, soon bristled under Sparta's heavy hand. Sparta, the self-proclaimed shield of Greece, began to crack. In Asia Minor, Persia, once Sparta's ally, brought the mighty Spartans to heel. Athens and Thebes, watching with sharpened knives, seized the moment to reassert their power. By 394 BC, Sparta's naval supremacy shattered. Off the coast of Cnidus, Persian ships, commanded insultingly by the Athenian Khanen and manned by Athenian crews, smashed Sparta's fleet, tearing apart their grip on the sea. Spartan control slipped further. Islands under their boot tore away from the alliance. Persian gold flowed like water across the Greek countryside, and with it came whispers, bribes, and a spreading discontent. In 390, outside Lycaon, the cracks in Spartan might widened. Athenian light troops, agile and deadly, harried the Spartan phalanx, softening it. Then came the crushing advance of Athens' hoplite phalanx. forcing the once invincible Spartans into a very humbling retreat. The Persians, always the puppet masters, imposed their peace in 387, the Peace of Antalcidas. It brought Athens back into prominence, but left Sparta perched precariously at the top. Persia's message was clear: break this peace and face their wrath. Sparta clung to its dominance, reestablishing its grip over smaller communities that dared to dream of independence. The Peloponnesian League was reinforced, its cities ordered to deliver men and taxes to Sparta, ready to march at a moment's notice. Yet cracks grew wider. Spartan ranks thinned, forcing the proud city to hire mercenaries, foreigners, who fought for coin, not for honor. Spartan rule turned capricious, arbitrary, and heavy-handed. The League's cities began to pray for deliverance, for a savior to strike from beyond. Deliverance came, not from Athens, but from Thebes, a city once overlooked but now rising on the horizon. Thebes, leader of the Boeotian League, had danced between alliance and rivalry with Athens. As allies, they expelled Spartan forces from central Greece and, in 376, humiliated Sparta yet again, this time at sea. Yet discord followed. Thebes and Athens quarreled like bickering brothers, and Sparta, bloodied but not broken, reclaimed lost ground. In 371, Sparta called for peace, hosting a conference to reassert control, but Thebes would not kneel. Their influence as head of the Boeotian League was rising, and they refused to step aside. Epaminondas, the indomitable leader of Thebes, stood his ground. When faced with Spartan obstinance, he walked out of the conference, leaving Sparta to stew in its arrogance. Cleombrotus, Sparta's king, smelled blood. He would not allow Thebes the time to arm its defenses. He would strike, swift and decisive. Cleombrotus assembled a force worthy of Sparta's name. 10,000 hardened infantry, their ranks drawn from Sparta and her allies, backed by 1,000 cavalry, scouts, and skirmishers, though rarely used to decisive effect in battle. These were the Hoplites, towering men sheathed in bronze, wearing breastplates that gleamed beneath the sun and greaves that turned their shins into iron. Each carried a great shield and gripped a long spear, a weapon made for thrusting, killing, and driving through flesh and bone. The formation was familiar and unchanging. The phalanx, a block of men 10 ranks deep, spears leveled like a bristling wall. It was an immovable line of death, the old order of Greek warfare where strength, discipline, and relentless endurance decided the day. Battle was brutality incarnate, a meeting of two phalanxes, each an unstoppable mass of flesh, armor, and spears. They would grind into one another, shields smashing against shields, the line groaning under the weight of men until one side's will broke and they turned to run. For centuries, Spartan discipline had been the razor's edge in these battles. When other men wavered, the Spartans stood firm, silent, unyielding, and unstoppable. With 10,000 men behind him, Cleombrotus knew he held the advantage. Thebes, outnumbered and seemingly outmatched, had brought to the field far fewer troops. The Spartan cavalry, more scouts than warriors, rarely turned the tide of battle. They were tools of reconnaissance, not instruments of destruction. The Thebans marched under the same phalanx discipline, but where they differed, where they found an edge, was in their cavalry. The Theban horsemen were not mere eyes of the army, they were its hammer. Thebes was fighting a war of survival. The Boeotian League, though steadfast, could only yield 6,000 infantry and 1,500 cavalry. They faced a Spartan horde, larger, heavier, and eager to crush them. Numbers mattered in phalanx warfare. To face 2 men for every one of your own was to stare death squarely in the face. It was the kind of math that doomed armies. But Epaminondas, a general with the mind of a strategist and the heart of a warrior, refused to accept the odds. He would tip the balance by force of will and ingenuity. What he devised that day had never been sealed on the battlefields of Greece or anywhere else. It was a masterstroke of tactics that would echo through the ages. Epaminondas gambled everything on a bold maneuver. He would load one flank with the weight of his army's might, while the other would remain deliberately thin. His cavalry, stronger, faster and sharper than the Spartans, would shield both wings, dictating the terms of engagement. On his left, he built a crushing spearhead, a reinforced mass of men pushed forward to strike. His right flank, weaker and staggered back, would refuse battle, denying the enemy a clear line of attack. In today's terms, he had refused his flank, a strategy unknown at his time. The plan was audacious. His left flank would obliterate the Spartan right, where Sparta's finest warriors stood. Meanwhile, his weaker right would hold, not fight, not break, just hold until the killing blow had been struck. At the heart of this deadly wedge stood Thebes' most fearsome warriors, the Sacred Band. 300 men bound by brotherhood and by love, trained to fight as a single, unstoppable unit. They would be the dagger thrust into Sparta's ribs. Epaminondas was ready. His army was disciplined, his strategy brilliant, and his mind sharp as a blade. He had planned for this moment, prepared to face the greatest warriors Greece had ever known. Near the village of Leuctra, 8 miles southwest of Thebes, Epaminondas established his camp. He planted his army like a stone in the path of the advancing Spartans, daring them to come. Cleombrotus, realizing he had lost the element of surprise, made camp just over a mile away. Between the two armies stretched an open plain, bare and unforgiving, a killing field, waiting for war. The advantage belonged to Epaminondas. He had chosen the ground. Every hill, every line of sight, every inch of that plain favored Thebes. The exact day is lost to time, but the month was July of 371 BC. The sun was high, the air stifling, and two armies stood ready to write their names in blood. Epaminondas struck first. He arrayed his men outside the safety of their camp, a deliberate act of defiance that told the Spartans this was no place for retreat. Cleombrotus answered in the language of Sparta, order and tradition. His men formed into their standard ranks, 12 deep, a wall of bronze and spears that had crushed countless enemies before. On the left wing, Cleombrotus stationed his allied troops, a position meant to counter Thebes' refused flank. At his right, the cavalry took their place, directly ahead of Sparta's strongest infantry line. To the eye, both armies appeared ready, two hardened hosts staring each other down. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Among the Theban ranks, morale wavered. Epaminondas knew it. That's why his right flank, thinner and hesitant, stood farther back, out of immediate danger, where fear could do less harm. The Spartans, however, spent the morning as men confident of victory. By noon, they were deep in their cups, wine coursing through their veins, making them bolder, perhaps, but careless. Some sources whisper of a deeper sting to Sparta's pride, that this day was sacred to their gods, a holiday when bloodshed was unwelcome. If true, it meant Epaminondas had chosen his day well. Reading his enemy like an open scroll, Epaminondas made his move. He ordered men to fall back toward camp, an illusion, a feigned retreat designed to lure the Spartans into overconfidence. The Spartans took the bait. Believing the Thebans were disbanding, their disciplined lines began to soften, breaking apart as men turned to retreat or to reform. Then, with precision, the Thebans snapped back into formation. Before the Spartans realized the trap, Epaminondas gave the order. The Theban line surged forward, unstoppable, unrelenting. In one brilliant stroke, Epaminondas had leveled the playing field. The Spartan advantage in numbers was now gone, squandered by their own mistake. The battle began with thunder. Theban cavalry on the left charged, lances lowered, hooves pounding. The Spartan horsemen were swept aside, scattered and broken, their ranks collapsing. In their panic, some fled too far to rally, while others crashed back into their own infantry, sowing confusion and chaos where order had once reigned. Epaminondas struck without mercy. The moment was his, and he knew it. He ordered his infantry forward, the strengthened left flank leading the charge, an avalanche of iron and of muscle. At the heart of the charge were the men of the Sacred Band, their spears thrust, their shields bashed, and their battle cries rose like a storm. The Spartans on the right, strong, proud, but now outnumbered, began to falter. And then it happened. Spartan lines broke. Small cracks became gaping holes, and Theban infantry poured through, driving deeper into the disarrayed ranks. Desperation set in. The Peloponnesian League forces tried to encircle the Thebans, but Epaminondas' plan held firm. The refused flank was too distant, and the left flank, thick with strength and fury, refused to yield. With nowhere to turn, the Spartans began to fall back, and the battle was lost. Sparta, the scourge of Greece, retreated to their camp, leaving behind 2,000 dead warriors. Their best men lay in the dust, and their pride was buried with them. Victory belonged to Thebes, but the cost was exhaustion. Though their casualties were light, the strain of battle hung heavy in the air, every man drenched in sweat and in blood. Their arms ached from the killing. The Spartans, despite their retreat, still outnumbered the Thebans. To assault their fortified camp, to risk further bloodshed after a battle already won, would have been madness. So when Cleombrotus extended an offer to negotiate, Epaminondas accepted. The Spartans knew they had lost the day. To fight on would have been folly. Cleombrotus was no fool. This battle, though a humiliation, was just the beginning. Sparta could not afford more losses, not yet. The Spartan forces withdrew under a cloud of shame. By the end, Theban banners stood unchallenged as far as the Corinthian Isthmus. Sparta, once the unshakable shield of Greece, had been driven from the north and the center. Leuctra had done what no other battle had before. It shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. Their political power, propped up by fear and force, began to crumble. But in Greece, balance mattered more than enmity. Fearing the rise of a dominant Thebes, Athens, once Sparta's mortal foe, joined hands with its old enemy. Survival had no room for grudges. For years, the Polis tore at each other like wild dogs. Then, in 362, at Mantinea, the heart of Thebes was ripped from its chest. Epaminondas, the architect of Leuctra, fell, struck down in the midst of his greatest victory. With his death, Thebes lost its guiding hand. What could have been an age of Theban supremacy ended instead in stagnation. No city-state could claim dominance over Greece. This weakness was an invitation. From the north, Philip of Macedon marched, a man with ambition as vast as the horizon. In 338, at Chaeronea, he crushed the Greek city-states beneath his disciplined phalanx and laid the foundations of empire. The sacred band of Thebes, the heart and soul of their army, was born under the leadership of Gorgidas. At first, they were little more than an elite guard, a shield for Thebes' citadel and its leaders. 300 men, hand-picked and hardened. Thebes gave them barracks, training grounds, and the singular purpose of perfection in war. Early on, their potential was buried. Gorgidas spread them throughout the ranks of the phalanx, their strength diluted and their impact invisible amid lesser men. The sacred band's discipline, skill, and relentless training could not shine, lost in a crowd that couldn't match their caliber. And so for a time, Thebes was blind to the weapon it held in its hands. What made the sacred band extraordinary was not just their training, it was who they were. The band was built of 150 pairs of lovers, men bound by apparently something deeper than comradeship. Love made them strong, and it was written that love made them fearless. In Greece, such bonds were neither secret nor shamed. The logic was clear. A man would fight harder, endure longer, and hold the line if his beloved stood beside him. And it worked. No man would flee, no man would falter. To break rank was not only to betray your brothers, it was to betray your beloved, in their words. And that shame was unthinkable. Their courage was a vow. To live dishonored was a fate worse than dying. This bond forged them into something unshakable at the time. Each man fought for himself, for his lover, and for the brotherhood they shared. The sacred band earned eternal glory when they shattered Sparta at Leuctra, yet Even they could not withstand the future. Philip of Macedon brought a new age of war, and under his son Alexander, the world itself would fall. Their story was brief, but it was legendary. At Chaeronea, the sacred band stood their ground, fighting to the last man. They were annihilated, and with them an era ended. They were never reborn.